Good afternoon, and thank you so much for attending today's event. Earlier this summer, I issued an executive order as an institutional response to national events that outlines concrete action steps to advance diversity, inclusion, and equitable practices here at Central Penn College. These action steps seek to reveal how we as a community can contribute to combating systemic racism. The commission has been hard at work. We've been meeting regularly, and the work groups have gotten together to really start the hard work of implementation of action steps. As part of the commission's charge, offering programming to help us engage in diversity and inclusion becomes imperative. As an institution of higher learning, it's our responsibility to educate our students, our faculty, and our staff on the dynamics and issues that have impact on our overall institutional mission and success. We began offering commission programming back in October with diversity, equity, and inclusion training in partnership with Leadership Harrisburg area and the Martin Luther King Jr. Institute. On behalf of the President's Commission, we continue these offerings with this most important program. Today, we will engage on the sensitive topic of gun violence and how its systemic impact contributes to matters of equity, access, and racism that disproportionately impacts diverse communities. These matters directly impact our Central Penn students and their families that we serve, whether we realize it or not. Over the years, many of our students and their families have been victims of gun violence or impacted by gun violence in their own communities. This year, we lost another student to gun violence. Today, we are delighted to partner with the Pennsylvania Office of the Attorney General, who joins us to lead this important conversation. We thank Attorney General Josh Shapiro and his staff for their willingness to educate us and provide some ways that we can help combat this public health crisis of gun violence. And that's what this is. This is a public health crisis. Before I introduce today's panel, I must first thank our program planner, President's Commission member, and the Director of Counseling at Central Penn College, Tom Palmeri, for everything he did to put this program together. So thank you, Tom. And I'd also like to thank Adrian Thoman and Janet Bixler and everyone else who helped put this program together today. To kick off our event, we have a message from Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro.
Hi, it's Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, and it's good to be with you today, albeit virtually. I wish we had the opportunity to be together in person. I wish I could see my friend Deb Donahue and thank her, of course, for pulling us all together here. Look, you already know too much and have carried too much trauma because of the epidemic of gun violence that exists all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so as you hear from members of our team in the Attorney General's office today, Anthony and Brendan and Jim and Ebony, I want you to know just how pivotal I think your voices are in trying to come up with a solution, in changing the reality of the world we live in today, because it is a choice that policymakers are making that lead us to this type of death and destruction in our communities today. We do not need to accept this, and you will be the voices that drown out those who favor inaction over action. Look, we in the Office of Attorney General are working hard, but of course we need your help and we need your voices and we need your power. As COVID-19 surges again, I want you to know that my office is continuing our work to keep Pennsylvanians safe. We're continuing to open up investigations into gun recoveries across Pennsylvania. And more than ever before, law enforcement is sharing data and tracing crime guns and taking down gun traffickers from Philadelphia to Erie and places in between. 68% more police departments in Pennsylvania are sharing data today on gun tracing, which is helping us solve crime and save lives. By sharing this data, we are able to identify patterns and be smart on crime. 9 times more gun trace reports have been shared by law enforcement, and 3 out of every 5 top gun retailers in Pennsylvania have moved to an e-record of sale, allowing us to be more nimble in our efforts to combat straw purchases and save lives. We're working hard to build on the successes here, known as our Track and Trace initiative. And of course, we invite you to learn more and invite your voices to help amplify this important effort. Look, I know last week there was another shooting in Harrisburg that struck close to home. And I want to encourage all of you to take that grief, take that pain, and continue to try and turn it into action. And let you know that we are listening. Let you know that your efforts matter and let you know that your voices are incredibly powerful in our community. By listening, by learning, by organizing, I truly believe we can make a difference. So look, thank you for all your work. Stay safe, stay healthy, be careful, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for that introduction. At this point, I would now like to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to read their very impressive bios to you. So our first panelist, Dr. Ebony Caldwell, is a transformative leader that has dedicated her career to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, organizational change, and strategic planning. Dr. Caldwell joined the PA Office of the Attorney General as the Diversity and Inclusion Officer in August 2018. She has over 15 years experience in DEI work as a college administrator, community advocate, and professional consultant. She serves on the National Advisory Council for the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity and an advisor to the Human Resources and Professional Development Committee. She's also a member of the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg Board and Governor Wolf's Affinity Commission Black History Month Committee. Dr. Caldwell holds a BA in psychology, an MA in psychology, and an EDD in executive leadership. Our second panelist is James A. Donahue III, one of our very own faculty members, Deb Donahue's husband. James graduated from Lehigh University in 1980 with a BA degree in journalism and government. After working as a newspaper reporter for a year, Mr. Donahue entered Duquesne University School of Law in Pittsburgh and graduated in 1984 with a JD degree. Mr. Donahue worked for a small firm in Norristown, Pennsylvania. He joined the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General in 1985. In 1997, he was appointed Chief Deputy Attorney General of the Antitrust Section. In 2004, Mr. Donahue won the Marvin Award from the National Association of Attorneys General for leadership in advancing the goals of the association. Mr. Donahue was appointed chair of NAG's Multi-State Antitrust Task Force and served in that position from 2009 to 2012. In 2013, Mr. Donahue became Executive Deputy Attorney General for the Public Protection Division, responsible for antitrust, charitable trust, consumer protection, civil rights and special litigation, healthcare, and tobacco enforcement. Additional roles included acting chief of staff and senior counsel to the Attorney General. He returned to the position of Executive Deputy Attorney General for the Public Protection Division, which now also includes the Fair Labor Section, and he also is admitted to practice law in Massachusetts. Our third panelist is Anthony Lker. Anthony is an educational and outreach specialist with the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General. Anthony's professional background includes extensive work with state government and as district director and community relations director in the U.S. House of Representatives. Anthony's background also includes work as a disciplinarian and member of the school leadership team with the School District of Philadelphia. Anthony spearheaded the development of a nonprofit agency designed to service economically disadvantaged youth in the areas of education and organized sports. Since inception, the program has serviced more than 400 at-risk and high-risk youth throughout the city of Philadelphia. Anthony has his BA degree from Temple University. And our fourth panelist today is Brendan O'Malley. Brendan is a 2002 graduate of Temple University Beasley School of Law, spent 4 years in private practice, and is admitted to practice law in the bars of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, in addition to federal courts in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. In 2003, Brendan joined the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office and spent 12 years in the trial division, the last 5 of which was in the homicide unit. He is currently the Chief Deputy Attorney General of the Gun Violence Section, which encompasses the Gun Violence Task Force in Philadelphia. He is sworn as a Special Assistant United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, assigned to the Violent Crime Unit. I truly want to thank all of our 4 panelists for being here today on this special topic, and at this point, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Fedrizzi. My name is Jim Donahue, and I want to take a couple minutes today to talk about the structure of our office and talk about how we can help, maybe in a small way, maybe in larger ways, with the issues of gun violence. The Office of Attorney General has 3 legal divisions. Those divisions are the Criminal Law Division, which handles investigations and prosecutions in matters where the office has jurisdiction over the prosecution of crimes, the Civil Law Division that handles the litigation where Commonwealth is a party. They have been at the forefront of all the litigation over the election over the past several months, and the Public Protection Division, which enforces many laws which impact people in their daily lives. I'm head of the Public Protection Division. We also have an administrative division that handles the support for all the work we do. As you know, and as you heard from Attorney General Shapiro, this issue is extremely important to us. And the fact that you have a large number of people from our office that have been involved in planning this program is evidence of how important this issue is. Poverty plays a significant role in the prevalence of gun violence. And most of our resources in the Public Protection Division focus on the types of conduct that can lead to or exacerbate poverty. Let me give you some examples. Pennsylvania prohibits payday and car title loans because these loans generally lead to consumers having insurmountable debts and, in essence, ensuring that somebody remains impoverished. Nonetheless, we've been involved in several cases with businesses offering illegal payday and car title loans. In fact, one car title lender is suing to stop us from enforcing the law. The interest rates on these loans are often in the hundreds of %. Moreover, in the car title loan area, you can lose your car, and people often need a car to get to work, to make the money they need to pay rent and for other essentials. These are really abusive practices, and we try to stop them. One of the biggest complaints we get involves contractors who take deposits from consumers and then either never do the work or do the work improperly. We recently sued a plumber in Pittsburgh who was telling people that they needed to have their sewer line replaced when all they needed was for the line to be unclogged. A consumer who replaced the line often had to pay $10,000 or more. That is a huge amount of money for most people, and the type of bill that could wipe out somebody's savings. Our fair labor and antitrust sections have reached a series of consent decrees with most of the major fast food chains that has had no poach agreements among their franchisees. These no poach agreements were based on the concept that restrictive covenants are permitted in employment contracts. But those restricted covenants usually apply in situations where somebody has specialized knowledge or has access to trade secrets. That's not really the case in the fast food industry. So what these agreements did was prohibit franchisees from hiring each other's employees. What that did was depress wages. If a franchisee could lose a good worker because another franchise wanted to offer more pay, that franchise could keep the worker by offering him or her a raise. But if there's an agreement that the franchisees won't try to lure each other's workers away, then wages remain flat. Our healthcare section deals with cases where either consumers cannot get access to the care they need or they get an unexpectedly high bill. We work to get those bills paid and get patients the access they need. One area where they are especially effective is in dealing with hidden specialists. These bills often arise when a person visits the ER. The hospital may be in the person's network, but the radiologists, or in some cases even the ER doctors who staff the ER, are not in the network, leaving consumers with an enormous bill. In the real estate area, there was an article a couple of days ago in the Philadelphia Inquirer reporting a study that showed that African Americans pay much higher mortgage interest rates and higher mortgage insurance rates. Discrimination in real estate is another area where we're working. So what does all this have to do with violence? One thing it does is these actions against consumers take more than an economic toll. A $10,000 sewer repair bill, or a roofer who's gone off with a several $1,000 deposit, or an enormous hospital bill places a huge amount of stress on people. In some cases, we have people crying on the phone to us because they don't know how they're going to pay for basics like food or shelter after being taken advantage of. In other instances, we have people tell us that they cannot take the financial pressure anymore, and they will take their own lives or occasionally go out and harm the person who they believe wronged them. In the broader context, in a broader context, young people see what happens to their parents and those around them. They see that people in their community can't get a break. So let's recap what we've talked about. You need a loan, but loans are only available at hundreds of % interest. You want a better job, but the opportunity to get even a little more an hour is snuffed out by a secret agreement. You need medical care, but the care you need seems extraordinarily expensive. Our office can help with all of this. If you or a family member have been treated unfairly, you can file a complaint with us at attorneygeneral.gov. Our staff is both passionate and dedicated about helping people any way they can. We know that people who call us tend to be older and less well off, but we want to reach out to more diverse communities. I know a lot of people are very concerned about reaching out to a law enforcement agency, but we are a resource for all communities that have been victimized by unscrupulous businesses, discrimination, or the insurmountable barriers people often face to get health care. I'm not unrealistic. I don't believe that getting someone's roof fixed will end gun violence, but stopping people from being driven into poverty or getting the tools they need to get out of poverty can reduce the grounds fertile for growing gun violence. Now I'm going to turn the program over to Ebony Caldwell, our Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and she has a very insightful presentation.
Good morning, or good afternoon, should I say. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here and get started. Okay, so my name is Ebony Caldwell, and I am the Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Office of Attorney General. And my job is to prioritize, operationalize, and strategize for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in how the agency does our work and how we reach and serve every corner of the Commonwealth. So today I'm here to talk about the intersection of gun violence and race. We want to explore a little bit about who it impacts and how, and what are the consequences. And first, we want to look at it in terms of a public health crisis. And a public health crisis is an urgent situation which the health of an area or population is adversely affected. And so if we think about 1979 in Harrisburg, where the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor malfunctioned and released radiation into the environment, that was considered a public health crisis. 1981, the AIDS epidemic was considered a public health crisis. 2005, Hurricane Katrina was considered a public health crisis. And even now, as we're in the midst of COVID in 2020, it's considered a public health crisis. There are 3 qualifiers to be considered a public health crisis. 1 is it affects a large number of people. 2 is it threatens health of the people over a long period of time. And then the 3rd is it requires an adoption of a large-scale solution. And by that definition, both premature deaths of Black people and systemic racial injustice can be considered a public health crisis. And in the US, nearly 40,000 people die from gunshots every year. And then 100,000 are wounded from guns every year. The numbers are very overwhelming, but they understate the impact. And so let's see if we can look at the impact a little bit more. So Black and brown folks make up 30% of the population, but yet 57% of homicides are Black people. The homicide victims are Black people, and 84% of them are Black men. And so when you look at the data, any way you look at it, the Black population is 82% on the right side of your screen, and on the left side of your screen, the 19% it definitely is juxtaposed, right? So you're looking at a small number of our counterparts or white population, 19% for homicide, and 82% for the Black population. And then if you even dig in a little bit further and think about age, young African Americans are more likely to be victims of gun homicide than younger people of other races. And if you can see the line is 5 times as much as Hispanics, and then you just go down from there. So it really is a public health crisis when you think about gun violence and then you overlay it with race. In the United States, gun violence is experienced in racially divergent ways. It disproportionately affects communities experiencing socioeconomic inequities and, social economic inequities, including racial segregation, and concentrated poverty. And so in these communities where people are segregated, they're experiencing poverty like Jim talked about, there's a lot more gun violence there that you would see there. You also see the differences, they show up in the aftermath of the gun violence. When you look at social supports, where the social supports are coming from after a gun violence incident, or how we respond to the survivors, even the narrative of blame and criminality after an incident of gun violence. So those are the racially divergent ways that gun violence can play out. And then I wanted to take a lens and and put it over gun violence and looking at it in terms of school gun violence versus race and gun violence. And then there's talks that we have with our students and with our children when we want to prepare them for things that unfortunate things that can happen in the world today. And so the gun violence talk is kind of given to students in schools. Maybe your parents talk to you about it. And it kind of talks about how spaces are typically safe. Sometimes you may experience random or rare violence. And then you hear kind of comments of how could it happen here, right? And so that's when we're talking about school and gun violence, or the emphasis on safety measures, they're already in place. So we're thinking about locked school doors or the presence of authority figures. Also, when you're thinking about school and gun violence, you're thinking about the safety is not depending on the student's behavior. So no matter who you are in the school, the authority figures will keep you safe, and you just need to pay attention to the authority figures, go where they tell you to go, stay behind the doors, maybe get under your desk. Those types of things will keep you safe, and authority figures are looked to as a source of comfort. But when you think about race and gun violence, we think about the race talk, and there's been a lot of research and information about this race talk that African-American parents have with their children before they send them out into the world. So it's from a lens of be alert and remember who you are and where you are at all times. So the emphasis is on danger as the primary and safety as the secondary. Right? And so students of color have to self-police their behavior to maintain safety. And they also have to be responsible for their own safety and not look toward authority figures necessarily, because sometimes those figures can be a source of potential danger. And so that's the difference when you overlay race on top of gun violence. And I say all these things to you today so I can give you the information, not to overwhelm you or to feed into a hopeless narrative, but to help you with your further awareness and what's happening out there and what you can do to be a part of the solution. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that you be the change that you want to see. And I don't know if you've heard of the 4 agreements before, but it's a good kind of lens to look through or philosophy to adopt in your personal and professional lives. You want to be impeccable with your words. Mean what you say what you mean. Don't make assumptions, right? We want to make sure that we are giving people the benefit of the doubt. We also don't want to take things personally, and we always want to do our best. The other thing is you want to try community involvement. Get involved in your community. Gun violence is not a black or white issue. It's not a male or female issue. It's a human concern, right? And so if we want to see change, it has to start with us. So get involved. Also, we want to give to get. I hear a lot of young people get upset around respect. He didn't respect me, or I feel like I was disrespected. But you have to give to get respect. Also, you want to try and see yourself more clearly than you see others. So really take that time to look inside, see what you're doing to exacerbate a problem, or again, being part of the solution. What can you do to be a part of the solution? And another thing I just wanted to mention here is personally promoting peace. We want to practice hope and promote peace so that we're not always on edge and things are not so dangerous every time we walk out of the door. And we can do that by starting with ourselves. Gun violence is something that we all have to deal with, and you have agency on your campus and in your communities, and you should use it to determine your mindset, choose your major, and find your voice, and then come with us in public service and help us be a part of the solution. We're working on it, but we need your help as well. And so that is the message that I want to leave you with today. And I'll turn it over to Brendan and Anthony, I believe, are next. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry we can't be with you all today, but we do appreciate how important this is. And Anthony and I are going to present together. We often do this. We often are out in the community. Anthony is excellent at public outreach, and I really enjoy going out to the communities with him. He definitely brings a unique perspective. Not necessarily one of law enforcement, but one that certainly understands the community. Anthony and I also talk about these issues just offline about the intersection of law enforcement and how it affects gun violence in the community. So it's difficult not to be with you all today, but one of the first things I always do whenever I speak about gun violence to a group like yourselves is to ask folks if they have lost anyone to gun violence. And I do know that you as a community have lost someone, and I am truly sorry for your loss. I know how difficult this is, and keep in mind, we're going to be talking about gun violence generally, but we do know that you all did lose someone to gun violence in Philadelphia and how difficult that is. I wanted to talk a little bit about my time in the homicide unit and my time at the Philadelphia DA's office. Because as you all know, Philadelphia has experienced a large increase in gun violence, but it's always been a problem in Philadelphia. Well over 300 homicides a year. This year, we're looking at approximately 450. Close to 80% of them are by gun. And as Ebony said, close to 80% of those are, the victims are Black males. So it's a issue, as Ebony laid out. It's something that I saw boots on the ground. I was actually promoted to the homicide unit right when I was having my first child, and that gave me a unique perspective and a unique ability to appreciate the experiences with my family, because literally when I started in the homicide unit, I walked into a caseload of 60 murders. And I was dealing with people that had lost a child every single day. And that made me appreciate more my own family, and that life could be extinguished extremely quickly and you could never have a chance to say goodbye. And that was awful for those families. But it also made me see how important it was to kind of live every day and know that these things could be taken away from you. So when I started, like I said, I had 60 cases, and more were coming in every day. And I had to look at those clinically, and I saw the cases generally broke out into categories like that. I would kind of see the same patterns. One was domestic violence, any kind of domestic case where someone was killed. a drug user being killed, a drug dealer being killed, someone being killed over a neighborhood or social media beef, a robbery, which often had an innocent person, somebody that was not involved in criminal activity at all, or an innocent bystander, somebody that was killed because somebody thought they were someone else, or somebody was just in the line of fire. And to back up what Ebony said, it was always focused almost exclusively in the same neighborhoods. The profile of the victim was almost always the same. And these were, the neighborhoods experienced deep, deep, deep poverty. There was blight everywhere, abandoned houses. There was not community guardians there. They were just really the kind of what you would say the worst of the worst neighborhoods. And the individuals that were killed often were involved in criminal activity themselves. They often didn't graduate from high school. They would kind of say, in my mind, they lived on the margins, right? They were drug dealers, they were drug users, they were people that would be out at 3 o'clock in the morning and bad things would happen to them. So it was people that were living on the margins of society, engaging in risky behavior, and that did not have community or family support. And what was most troubling to me was I found that these people that were killed were oftentimes more important in death than they ever were in life. They were people that our community didn't really embrace or prop up, like, you know, the failure of the school system to get these individuals through school, failure of their own family, or their own neighborhood to really set them on the right path. And I also found, and Anthony will speak on this a little bit, was the identity of the individuals that were killed or doing the killing, right? So I identify myself primarily as a father, as a husband, as a lawyer. I know Anthony does the same thing. Whether you identify yourself as a teacher, identify yourself as a student, identify yourself as an athlete, the individuals that were most susceptible to gun violence were individuals that did not identify with those things, that they identified primarily as a member of a group or a gang. I call them groups. We don't really have gangs in Philly or Harrisburg. It's just neighborhoods that you grew up in a certain neighborhood and you would defend that neighborhood with your life or with a gun. And that identity, because you're not identifying as a student, or you don't have an opportunity to really have pride in your job, whatever that may be, and you're not identifying yourselves, those individuals were not identifying themselves with something that would essentially keep them out of trouble or keep them off the corner at the late hours of the night. So essentially what I would see was these individuals really had no identity other than the identity of their neighborhood, other than the identity of their group or their gang. And so this was really the people that had suffered from poverty, lack of education, lack of community support, and it would be a devastating effect on their family. And that shocked me too, and it became a consistent pattern where I had been dealing with people that had been shot non-fatally for many years, and like no one seemed to care about it. Even them, they didn't seem to care. You know, obviously they were putting up some barriers, but when these individuals were killed, the families were devastated by that. And every single murder I had, the families were just very cooperative and would try to help me and would show up to court every time. And I'm like thinking about this person again, I want to get back to what I said before, is that sometimes they were more important in death than they were in life, that we didn't give them the support they needed. So primarily the gun violence I saw was people that were just really susceptible to having something bad happen to them. And I really feel like it's important to tell you all that the people that this is affecting are the ones that we need to reach. They're the ones that, they may, again, drug users, drug dealers, people engaging in risky activity. Those are the ones that we need to meet. Those are the ones that we need to kind of pull back from those risky behaviors, take them away from the possibility of being killed, because it's really dangerous out there. And if you're engaging in those activities, you're going to be more susceptible to that. And I just want to conclude with this, is that when I realized how important those people really were, to me, again, like I started, I tried hundreds of cases, I saw hundreds of cases, and each one was important to me. But when I saw the devastating effect it had on the family, and that, in some cases, the family tried to get the person out of that risky behavior, it really came full circle for me, which was these individuals are really, they're being set up to fail. And us as a society, it's not necessarily on the individual, but us as a society. What does it say about us as a society that we're letting this kind of behavior go on that far downrange, that we can't stop it? Why we need to do a better job of stopping this kind of at its source. And that's a big thing that Anthony speaks about. It's a lot of what Anthony does in terms of his outreach. And I'm going to kick it over to him to discuss, some of the things that he sees with trauma, identity, and how those play a role in really, like I said, ending up in these extreme acts of violence, which are, unfortunately, they're all too common.
Brendan, thank you so much. I would like to thank Tom. I would like to thank Adrian, as well as Sarah Charles, our director of the Office of Public Engagement, for organizing this event today. My name is Anthony Lker. I am an education and outreach specialist with the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General, and our office is, of course, under the direction and leadership of Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who you heard from at the beginning. When we look at gun violence, we must look beyond the numbers. The data is certainly relevant and has its place, but most important is the ongoing loss of precious lives, often young, and the devastation, along with the levels of trauma, as Brendan highlighted, that gun violence is bringing to families and communities across America is a problem and is a crisis. As Ebony mentioned, communities of color are often disproportionately affected by this epidemic. Regardless of what lens you view gun violence through, it affects us all, from mass shootings to economically suppressed and underserved communities that are being decimated by gun violence daily. This epidemic is both a public health crisis and a public safety crisis. The outreach work that I am honored to perform on behalf of the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General entails a gun violence component, and I work very closely with Mr. Brendan O'Malley from the Gun Violence Task Force. The work is unique and provides me with the opportunity to meet people where they are. For me, that's crucial to the impact that is needed to rightfully address this crisis. Apathy, numbness, indifference, and systemic desensitization are just a few words I would use to describe how some people feel towards this issue. Unfortunately, gun violence is now woven into the fabric of American culture, and in some instances has become so routine, some feel it will never be resolved. I respectfully disagree with those sentiments. There is work to be done, and at times these issues can seem insurmountable, but we must refuse to be defeated. The Commonwealth has numerous hardworking, dedicated, and committed individuals who are putting forth a tireless effort to help right these wrongs. I've had the honor to work alongside Dr. Dorothy Johnson-Spite and the wonderful folks from Mothers in Charge, just as an example of the needed community partnerships between law enforcement and stakeholders in the communities that we serve throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Collaboration and a coordinated effort play an instrumental role in addressing this crisis in a comprehensive way. We cannot simply keep throwing proposed solutions at the wall, hoping something will eventually stick. We are in desperate need of increased boots on the ground. And Brendan mentioned being part of those boots on the ground in the beginning of his career. And that boots on the ground approach needs to include a hub of services. This is not just a law enforcement problem. Components like early intervention, education, social services, community organizations are all just examples of what it takes to help address this issue. The victimization pipeline is growing exponentially by the day, the services that we need to apply and the approaches that we need to refine have taken to levels that are emergent in nature. From homicides and shooting victims to the family, friends, and associates that are impacted by these events. The devastation is simply unconscionable. And that series of individuals who I just identified are all part of that victimization pipeline. Whenever we see gun violence taking place, there is always collateral damage and effects that are resulting from it. So it's not always just the shooting victim or the person who is unfortunately added to the number of homicides. It's their children, it's their mothers, their fathers, their guardians, the people in the communities where they live. We're all affected by this. There are far too many disconnects in society as it stands. Disconnects from underserved communities, disconnects from those who are in need of help. I don't say this as a criticism. I say this to highlight the sense of urgency needed to identify real solutions to a systemic problem. My family has been affected by gun violence. Although the incident took place more than 10 years ago, there's not a day that goes by that I forget about the tragedy that took place on that day. Gun violence and gun play is not something that should be worn as a badge of honor. And I find that far too frequently, that is what is happening with some. Where did we go wrong? Why do we see some communities that have ongoing beef that just seems endless? It's easy for me to say hope springs eternal, but what does that really mean for someone that feels like they don't have any hope? We all have a purpose, even if we have yet to identify what that stated purpose is. We also have choices. Although, as Ebony mentioned, the race never begins at the same place for everyone. We don't all have access to the same level of resources. When we go into that identifying piece that Brendan spoke about and how I identify myself as a man of color, in particular, a Black man. I identify myself as a father. I identify myself as someone who is married with a family. I identify myself who is proud to do the work that I do and is committed to going out into the community every day. So when we look at our identities and we look at self-respect and in some instances self-hatred, again, we all have a purpose, even if we have yet to identify what that stated purpose is. Not everyone is going to view you the same way. You are going to encounter people in society who may not be fond of you for whatever those reasons may be. But none of that can afford to get in the way of you achieving what you are setting out to achieve. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we are all variables in this equation, whether directly or indirectly. Value yourself, and that value begins with that self-respect that I just mentioned moments ago. It's always easy to get there. It's not always easy to get there, I should say. I apologize. And we all need help along the way, regardless of where we come from or what our background may be. Where does that help come from? For many, that's the first step in the process. Everyone is not always going to understand. Everyone is not always going to get it. But that certainly doesn't mean we need to stop trying. A portion of this begins with forgiveness of self. So it's okay to feel validated in regards to your efforts to make yourself better. And maybe making yourself better means becoming more worldly. Maybe making yourself better means leaving the community that you were raised in, that you have been committed to throughout your livelihood. But it doesn't mean that you can't come back. Because once you do go out and you do achieve what you are looking to achieve, we can always come back and give back to those who helped us along the way. This is a commitment. How are we going to have a significant impact on these trends? Part of it is mentoring. A lot of it is early intervention. But that early intervention in that mentoring involves a commitment where we have to help see people through. This is not just a scenario that we can look at and say, let's just check off the box, or let's just do this for the purposes of window dressing. This needs an ongoing commitment. This needs an ongoing level of resources that is allocated towards it. That's what we should be working towards daily, working towards bettering ourselves as individually and collectively. Collectively, the results will be resounding. I want you all to remain encouraged and know that we all play a part in helping others, trying to make our communities a safe and welcoming place for everyone. We're not all impacted the same way by gun violence. Not all of us have experienced gun violence directly. But again, whether it's in the form of mass shootings, communities that we live in that are hampered by gun violence on a daily basis, or it's something where we've been directly affected because we've lost a loved one or someone who is near and dear to us. It's a problem, it's a crisis, and it's affecting everyone's quality of life. I'm proud to stand before you today as a member of the workforce for the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General, and I love doing the work that I'm doing, and I welcome anyone into this space, any and everyone into this space that is looking to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, so I'm Tom Palmeri. As Dr. Fedrizzi said, I am the program director for today. So I'm gonna just facilitate a panel. Again, Dr. Caldwell, Mr. Lker, Mr. O'Malley, Mr. Donahue, thank you so much for participating. So we did get a couple of questions that I want our panelists to speak on behalf of before we wrap up. So the first question, oh, we've got, and you're sending more in right now. So the first question, and I'll direct this one to Dr. Caldwell. So what can our students potentially do now if they feel passionate about this issue, given the fact that so many of our programs do offer internship opportunities and encourage students to seek those out?
Sure. And so the Office of Attorney General has internships that we encourage students to think about. If you go to the www.attorneygeneral.gov and go to the employment section, there are internships and you can sign up for the alerts. But as Jim talked about in the beginning, his section takes on interns. They do a lot of work in the community. Anthony's section, Office of Professional Engagement, and we are branching out and doing internships all over the office. And that is just one office, but public service, like Anthony talked about, is definitely something to think about when you want to give back to your community, when you want to make a difference. So I would encourage you to look at the Office of Attorney General as well as other agencies within the Commonwealth.
Awesome, thank you. Another question that we got, and I'll speak on part of this, is the question is, I'm wondering what's the best way to address gun violence with students when some of them might have had direct personal traumatic experiences. It seems important to acknowledge, but how do we bring it up in a way that makes those students in particular feel safe? So I'm going to start that response by just saying, you know, I think what the presenters have really done today is highlight that this is not an easy conversation to have, nor should it be an easy conversation to have. This is a program, this is something that affects people in real and significant ways. And we as staff members at the college, just providing that empathetic space to have those conversations is really part of it. But the next part of it is, and I think, you know, this speaks to Dr. Caldwell's response, is to help our students find practical things that they can do to really like enact that change, and then help us to figure out as an institution how we can potentially look at that at our Central Penn community. You know, just last night, for example, two of our staff members, Megan Peterson and Asia Sargent, facilitated a forum on students' experiences with racism. And there's some really good work that's going to be coming out of the Presidential Commission for Diversity and Inclusion to really help look at how we can change some of that culture that exists even within our own community. But allowing the space to have some of those conversations is a huge part of it. And I don't know, Anthony, I'm thinking about what you shared in your portion of the presentation. Like, how would you recommend that, you know, staff and then even other students that might not have had direct personal experience with gun violence, what do you think their role is? And there was another question about what individuals who aren't affected of this personally, what steps can they take?
So I think first and foremost, and thank you so much, that's an excellent question and one that I will take a few moments to unpack, if you will. So there are a number of spaces that are available for even those who consider themselves as novices and or may not even have any experience working in this space and in and around these issues. What I would encourage you to do first is to continue to educate yourself on the issues at hand. Have a willingness to learn. Embrace the ideas of the community organizations that are accessible to you, who are looking for folks to volunteer as part of their boots on the ground effort. Again, you will not necessarily always, everyone is not always going to necessarily be met with open arms, especially with this kind of work, because it is so difficult and so nuanced in so many ways. But you can't let that get you down. You can't let that in any way discourage you. We have a number of resources throughout the Commonwealth, including our office. So if there are any ideas and direction that we could provide in regards to those organizations that are in people's immediate communities that are looking for volunteers and people to help them in their efforts, we would be more than happy to provide that information. And again, this is a problem that has no face attached to it. It has no color, no ethnicity. It crosses all cultural lines, and we need everyone collectively and collaboratively to work together to again help create safe, welcoming communities for everyone. And I know one of the questions that I saw in the box, Tom, if I can just take a moment to answer this as well, came from our own Jim Donahue, and it inquired about how do you get community organizations to effectively work together? Communication. That's the biggest piece. It's all about communication. Once we can effectively communicate, once we have the ability to sometimes get out of our own way and understand that, other people's ideas can also be welcomed in this equation, even if they're only just beginning to start their work in the process, then I think we could be that much more successful moving forward.
Yeah, and I think I love personally what you're talking about as far as communication, but what therapist wouldn't, about this idea of really recognizing that everybody's voice really matters on this. There was a question that came through, and I think it's already been answered, but I think it's worth reading, is what can an individual do to facilitate change when they are not a resident of areas where gun violence might be occurring? Like everyone's been saying, I think this idea of just still having the conversation, still listening, still recognizing that maybe your job isn't to speak, but it's to elevate the voice of others to speak. And I think, like, especially at Central Penn, like, we as staff, faculty, but also I'm talking directly to y'all, to the students, you have a voice, we need to hear it, we benefit by hearing it. My personal hope is that after spending almost a full hour with us, that you walked away with more questions than answers, and that you feel empowered to want to learn more, but also to want to do something. And it's our job at Central Penn to help you figure out how you can do more. In a second, when we wrap up, I'm also going to be putting a slide with the email addresses of our panelists. They have given us permission to make that communication available to you, so that if you have questions about what you heard about, you can send it directly to them. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you guys. I really thank Dr. Fedrizzi Williams for giving me the ability to put this program together for everybody. I also want to give a special shout out to Adrian Thoman and Janet Bixler, who helped us to manage all the tech support. Zoom's super complicated sometimes. And then also to our very own Deb Donahue, who was really not only is she Jim's wife, but she's also a business faculty member here. And she was the person that approached me about the value of putting this program together and got us connected. So thank you so much to everyone involved. Thank you so much for faculty for allowing us to be part of your classrooms. So as you all click out, just give it a minute, and I'm gonna put the slide up with everybody's contact information. And I just wish you all a beautiful rest of the day. And please don't let the conversation start here. As everyone's been saying, there's a lot of work to do. So let's go and do.
Tom, could I just add one component to
Of course.
Community organizations collaborating effectively? Again, it's not just a communication piece, it's also a willingness to listen. So even if you are not the one who was responsible for coming up with the idea, it certainly doesn't mean that we cannot merge ideas and do things together collaboratively.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anthony. All right, I'm going to put the slide up, and then you are all free to go about the remainder of your day. And this presentation is going to be made available on Central Station and Student Central later on this week. So you can all click out as you have the content information needed. Thank you again.